Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, photographing big cats, India Tiger Photo Expedition, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Surya Ramachandran. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Surya, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rob. Hello, everyone. It's always exciting to talk about a trip that's just about to start in a month's time. We are all really looking forward to it in India, and those of you who have signed up, we are looking forward to seeing you in India. Before I jump into the presentation, the webinar, the topic that we're going to speak about today, I'm just going to turn off my camera and I'll come back on for the question and answer. This is just to save bandwidth because I'm in a remote location in India. Okay, here we go. So, photographing tigers, big cats in India. So, this is one of our flagship trips. We go to a very, very special place. In fact, the whole itinerary is very, very interesting. I'm sure a lot of you would have read it, but I want to go through it in a slower pace and also get into some of the important details about the whole plan. But before getting into the actual trip and the things that go on in the trip, I want to tell you a little bit about the main hero of the trip, the tiger that all of you have signed up to see, and tell you a little bit about why you're coming to India and why you're coming to specifically Ranthambore to see these cats. So, if you look at this map, this is a map of South and Southeast Asia and also East Asia. And all the different tigers that you're seeing are actually the various subspecies of tigers in the world, starting from the Siberian tiger to the Bengal tiger to the Indo-Chinese tiger, the Malayan, the Sumatran, and of course, the ones in the gray are the subspecies that don't exist currently in the world. They have become extinct. So we have six different subspecies that are roaming our South and Southeast Asian forests currently, out of which we will be talking about the Bengal tiger, which is found in the Indian subcontinent. When I say Indian subcontinent, I'm talking about India, Nepal, Bhutan, parts of Burma, and of course, Bangladesh. So this is one of the subspecies. So if you really want to get into subspecies, the differences are very subtle. It is more down to adaptability over the many, many years that they've been isolated populations. And also like some of them are snow dwellers, some of them are forest dwellers. The differences are very, very minimal. But overall, yes, if you really get into the DNA and the body proportions, yes, there is some differences between the subspecies. But in essence, it's all the same. So this is a map of India where the Bengal tigers are found. Do you know where in India the tigers are found? So Bengal tigers are found in India, yes, but where in India? Uh, I'd, I'm going to answer that now. It is basically all over this map. Bengal tigers are found all over this map, except the pale yellow bit on the northwest of India, which is close to Pakistan, the true deserts, and of course the high peaks of the Himalayas. So tigers avoid these two areas, but otherwise are found pretty much all across the country. In fact, I should actually say they were found all across the country, but we'll get to that in a bit. This is a better map that will give you an understanding of where tigers are found. This is actually how India looks. The high Himalayas to the north, the rivers flowing down from the Himalayas, then the peninsula with the smaller mountain ranges to the south. So tigers are found everywhere except the highest peaks and of course to the extreme left of the map, the hot desert, the true desert, that's where they are not found. The high peaks and the true desert. I really like to use this map because it gives a very good perspective of how isolated India is from the rest of the Asian landmass, thanks to the high Himalayas. So, coming back to where tigers are found, this map is a rough representation of the tiger reserves. What we call as tiger reserves are basically protected areas or national parks where tigers are found. So, these are some of the states or the various regions in India where tigers are found and the various protected areas that are there within each state. So, you can see that tigers were found in a wider area before, but now are restricted to fewer states than where they roamed previously in the past. So, what do tigers need to survive? We are talking about why tigers existed there or where tigers are found in India, but we need to understand why tigers are found there. So, tigers, we generally think are forest animals. They need dense forests. They need like a lot of areas to roam. They need like grasslands. They need lots of prey. All of this is true. Tigers do need all of that. But tigers have also shown within India itself that they can survive along our coastline. So tigers live in the Sundarbans. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Sundarbans. The Sundarbans is the largest mangrove or tidal forest in the world. And in this tidal forest, tigers actually live by crossing vast channels of brackish water or salt water. They live along with bull sharks, saltwater crocodiles. They feed occasionally on deer, but they also have been recorded feeding on fish and sea turtles. So it's a very, very interesting thing. And this is not just one or two tigers, there are about 200 tigers that live in this mangrove ecosystem. And if you move to the other extreme, tigers are also found in the high Himalayas. So in Bhutan and even parts of India, tigers have been seen and camera trapped in strange place. In fact, I remember seeing one camera trap where there was a tiger and a snow leopard and a leopard in, captured by one single camera trap at 13,000 feet. That's how incredibly adaptable these cats are. So this is one news clipping that came from the Indian Himalayas about a tiger that was roaming at 12,000 feet. So tigers are moving back to some areas where they were found earlier, but we are not going to go into those places. We are not going to the mangroves. We are not going to the high Himalayas to see tigers. But we are actually going to a place which is probably the tiger capital of the world, which is Ranthambore National Park. So, Ranthambore National Park is a very, very interesting place. It's a rocky forested environment where there's a very, very good number of tigers. Over 100 tigers roam this park. And what is interesting about the park is it also has the ruins of the erstwhile kingdoms, the forts, their small hutments. All of that still exists, and the forest is taken over. And the tiger uses these ruins very often to move around in the park. At Ranthambore, why does Ranthambore look like a good habitat for tigers? We need to understand, why is Ranthambore good? Why does Ranthambore have 100 tigers, whereas some places have a lot fewer, some places have none? So Ranthambore has a very, very good prey base. It has very, very high numbers of deer, which is sambar and spotted deer, and also has some species of antelope and even wild boar, which the tigers need. So what they actually say about tigers is that they say tigers need 52 deer-sized prey in a year to survive. So this is the scientifically accepted number, 52. Obviously, it could be more or less depending on the size of the tiger and how frequently they hunt and what kind of prey they hunt. But essentially, it says 52 deer-sized prey. That means one hunt a week, and that is something that's important to keep in mind when we talk about habitat quality and prey base for tigers. So when you talk about habitat quality, we are talking about prey base, we are talking about availability of shade, availability of water, availability of safe spaces where tigers can rest, availability of places where tigers can escape extreme weather conditions. So all of this comes under habitat quality. So these two factors, habitat quality and prey base, determine tiger territory sizes overall. So, for example, in the social network of tigers, if I may call it that, the female is the key player. The female, the tigress, she occupies roughly in Ranthambore. A female can occupy about 10 to 15 square kilometers, uh, and there could be about 3 to 4 females who could encompass the territory of a large male tiger, which could extend to about 50 to 100 square kilometers. So that is how tiger territories work. Females hold about 10 to 15 square kilometer, and about 3 to 4 females are generally found. This is a very simple way of putting it, but yes, this will give you an understanding of how territories work in tigers. So when I say 10 to 15 square kilometer in Ranthambore, if you go to a park, for example, where the prey density is a lot less or there's a lot of disturbance. In fact, I've worked in one park where one female held about 150 square kilometer of territory, because that's the kind of territory she needed to have to be confident of raising her own cubs. So that is how territories work. Habitat quality and prey base determine territory sizes. But once territory sizes are determined, usually a male needs 2 to 3 females within his area for him to have a viable chance of pushing his DNA further to future generations. But when you talk about territories, obviously they don't build fences, obviously they don't build walls, they don't do all of that. They actually just mark their territory by using scent. So very often they spray a particular musky liquid on a tree, or they scratch a tree, or they scrape the ground. That is how they mark their territory. So it is very very interesting that when sometimes you see a tiger walking through the jungle, they'll keep doing it because marking a territory is very important, not just to demarcate territory, but to also let other tigers know. For example, if a male tiger is in an area, it lets the other males know. If a female is in heat, the males will get to know. All of this information is there in the tiger's scent marks. So this is how the tigers actually read their scent mark. So they make this funny face. It's called a Flehmen, Flehmen, Flehmen response. So very often tigers, when they come across scents that they want to get to know more about, they make this really funny laughing face, and that is how they get more information. In fact, this is the same behavior that snakes do when they put their tongue out to assess the environment a bit more. That's the same thing the tigers do, where they put their tongue out to take in further information about the surroundings. So this is called a Flemen that the tigers do. So to sum it up, this is a cartoon by a very good friend of mine. His name is Green Humor. So he put it together in a very simple way of how the social media of tigers work, how they react to different scents, how they react to other individuals, how they react to a female in heat, how they communicate with each other. So the one thing to remember is, yes, unlike lions, tigers are solitary animals. They're solitary big cats. They roam alone, but they are not alone. Tigers are solitary, but they're not alone. Every tiger is aware of what every other tiger is up to in the forest at all times, thanks to this invisible, to our eyes, this invisible communication system that they have. Females with cubs. So this is the most important social structure for a tiger. So a female's entire purpose in her adult life is to mate and raise cubs. So she's basically always either looking for a mate, or pregnant, or raising cubs in her adult life. So a female generally tends to have three sets of cubs, sometimes four sets of cubs in her lifetime, and that is her sole purpose, to protect the cubs and raise them to adulthood. So in Ranthambore, again, like every other healthy tiger population, it is all we always see females with cubs, or females who are about to have cubs, or females looking for a mate. So that is the entire purpose of a female in her adult life. But having said this, we've spoken about tigers. But how do we find them? Unlike the African plains, unlike the safari systems in Africa, where you drive through these open plains and you can put your binoculars out and you can see for miles in different directions. Unlike that, in India, the forests are dense. Even though we are coming in the summer, even though the forests are thinner overall, the truth of the matter is tigers are solitary animals. They hunt by camouflage, so very secretive animals, and they can be hard to find. So it is unlike looking for lions in Africa. It is very different from looking for jaguars in the Pantanal. Finding tigers in India is a very very different ball game, and it involves not just finding them with our eyes, but listening to the jungle. So for example, we look for clues, so we look for tracks. We also very often listen to the jungle because there are prey animals which give a particular sound called warning calls or alarm calls when a tiger is around. So when they give those sounds, we try to stop the vehicle, listen to these sounds, and move in that direction, because that gives us a good idea of which way the big cat is moving. So tracking tigers in India is as exciting as seeing tigers in India. I want you all to remember this when you come to India, that it is not just about seeing the cats, it's also about understanding how we find them in our forests. And of course, one of the key, most important details of our summer trips in India, especially in a forest like Ranthambore, which is at the edge of the desert, is that in the heat of the summer, when it gets to about 40-42 degrees Celsius, tigers cannot take the heat. We have lemonade, we have neck cooling liquids, we have caps, but tigers have a fur coat. So you can imagine how difficult it is for them. So they cool off in the hottest parts of the day by going and sitting in water. They are one of the few big cats in the world, few cats in the world, in fact, who willingly take to water to cool themselves off. So that is something that kind of tips the balance in our favor, in that the hotter parts of the day we start looking for tigers around water, because we know that they need to absolutely cool off. Of course, there are a lot of water bodies, and tigers have always multiple water bodies to choose from, but it still increases our chances by a huge number. Going back to the history of tigers, of course, we spoke about how tigers were once found across India, but now they are found in these national parks, which are like islands located in different parts of the country. And that is fundamentally down to large scale hunting and deforestation that happened in the 19th and the 20th century. In fact, it ran unchecked even after the Indian independence in 1947. So it took us almost 20 years after our independence to realize that what we have done to our forests, what we are doing to our tigers and other animals. And that is when the Indian government created the concept of tiger reserves or forests dedicated to the protection of tigers and their habitat. This happened in 1972 with five initial tiger reserves, and interestingly, Ranthambore was one of them. Now we have around 58 tiger reserves in India, and Ranthambore remains to be one of the main premier tiger reserves. And good news, or news in general, we'll talk about this also, is that over the years, the numbers have slowly climbed, and we have over 4,000 tigers in India now. It might not sound like a big number, but remember in the 1990s, we were close to having about 1,000 tigers in India. It was going through a crisis because of poaching, because of mismanagement of parks, but there have been multiple wake up calls, and I think we are slowly getting things right, but we have a long way to go as a country to ensuring a happy life for our tigers and also for the people who live around tigers. So Ranthambore, yes, one of the premier tiger parks of our country. You can see that it is located in a very rocky mountain range. I'll also why I wanted to show you in this map is right next to the right of Ranthambore. You see this park named Kuno National Park. That is where the African cheetahs have been reintroduced in India. Just in fact across the river from Ranthambore National Park. So the cheetahs are on the other side of the river. Of course, we won't be going there. That area is still not open for tourism. The cheetahs are still in enclosures, but essentially it's just about from where we are staying, probably like 20 miles away is where the cheetahs are. So this will give you a better idea of our routing for our trip. One very interesting fact about Ranthambore, the park we are going to see tigers, is that it is probably the westernmost tiger distribution in the world. So, to put it in a very different sense, I'll use the next map. There are no tigers west of Ranthambore currently. All the tigers exist to the east of Ranthambore, northeast, southeast, east. But Ranthambore is currently the westernmost tiger population in the world, and it is located right at the edge of the hot Thar Desert. So this area, though it is a desert condition, because of the mountain range and because of the microhabitat created by the forest, tigers are able to survive there. So it is a very hot place. It is a very dry place. All of these things work in our favor when we go to Ranthambore to look for tigers. So our routing is basically we start in Delhi and make our way down to the city of Jaipur, which is the heritage city of which is close to Ranthambore. In fact, Ranthambore used to be the hunting grounds of the Jaipur Maharajas in the past. Now it's of course a protected national park. So Jaipur is the kingdom, which is now a big city, which is where we'll be visiting. It's a beautiful heritage city, and we have a very interesting park that we visit in Jaipur for another big cat, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we go further south towards Savai Madhopur, which is the town right outside Ranthambore National Park. So this is where we will be in India to give you a larger perspective. So we are basically in the northwest, north to northwest region of our country of India. India is a big country, of course, not as big as America, but it is very, very big in the general sense, and it's very varied. So it's very important to know that which part of the country you will be visiting. So in a nutshell, this is the tour that we have planned and organized. We start in Delhi. We go to the older parts of this city in Delhi on day two, where we'll be going from our hotel early in the morning, and going to visit some parts of the old city or the old Mughal kingdom of Delhi, including and also visit parts of the new city. So we'll be doing a mix of walks, we'll be doing some driving around. We'll also be doing a very exciting rickshaw ride or a cycle rickshaw ride through the old town, through the busy, bustling streets. It all makes for very interesting street photography. We'll also go to the flower markets and the spice markets. So it's a very, very interesting introduction to India. Of course, it's an introduction to a very, very small part of India, but it'll give you a good picture. The next day, we drive to Jaipur and arrive there for lunch and go for a safari in the afternoon to Jalana Leopards Reserve, which is actually a city forest of Jaipur. But I'll talk about that in a minute. On day four, we do a photography walk through some monuments and some streets and markets and temples of Jaipur city before we check out and head towards Ranthambore National Park, which is roughly about a 3 hour drive from Jaipur city, where we will have lunch at our hotel. And from there, we go in for our first safari. And the next 4 days, next 5 days, sorry, will be morning and afternoon safaris in Ranthambore looking for wildlife. And of course, as a part of the photography departure, we also visit Agra, which we will be driving onwards from Ranthambore to the city of Agra, where we will be visiting the Agra Fort, and of course, we'll be visiting the Taj the next morning before we head back to Delhi to end the trip. So this is roughly the routing that we are going to do. But I want to talk about certain elements of the trip in a little bit more detail so that you are aware of why we go there and what is exciting about that place. So this is the city forest of Jaipur. The Jaipur is a city of 4 million people. 4 million people is the population of the Jaipur city. And just at the edge of the city, in fact, part of it is almost within the city, there is a small park which is home to around 25 to 30 leopards. That's how interesting India is. Wildlife and people coexist in many more ways than one. It's not just the small villages, but even big cities. In fact, leopards move into the city at night to hunt dogs and pigs. Sometimes I've seen, I went for a friend's wedding, and on the wedding event, there was a compound wall and there was a leopard sitting there. So that is how I got to know about this place almost 15 years ago. But now it's become a very well protected area where people come to see leopards. So this place is called Jalana, and we basically do one safari here in the afternoon to get a good chance of finding leopards, and sometimes we also see striped hyenas and desert foxes. But remember, when we do one safari to look for big cats, it is not always going to be successful. But this is more of an idea for us to understand each other. All of us go on a safari once before going to Ranthambore, so that I understand your photography requirements, you understand how things work in India, how safaris are. So it's more of an initiation drive, I'll say, as and rather than a drive focused on finding cats. But if we do find them, yes, we'll have a great time. So yes, the chances are good. But having said that, since it's just one drive, we'll go and experience the place, experience the park. In fact, this park is almost as similar to Ranthambore, except that there are no tigers here. There are only leopards and some canids like desert foxes and hyenas, some antelope, lots of birds. So it's a very interesting place. But we're doing just one drive here as an initiation on our first afternoon in Jaipur. But what is really exciting about Jaipur, apart from the wildlife, is what we do the next morning. So we actually go to the pink city. So Jaipur is famous for its pink color of the old town. So the sandstone that was used to build the old town was painted pink to commemorate the visit of the King of England when he visited. So when he visited, they decided to paint the whole area pink. So that's why it's called the Pink City. So we will be walking through the Pink City, some of the monuments, some of the architectural heritage buildings, the sites, and also visiting some very interesting markets and try our hand at street photography. So these are my pictures from last season where I just had my phone. I didn't have a street photography lens with me, so I just played around with my phone, and some of the guests had cameras. We had a really, really good time. So we walk through the flower market. We go to the place where they feed the monkeys outside the temple. We also go to attend a temple ceremony. We go see some of the monuments. So it's a very, very interesting short walk, very brief, but it gives a very nice picture. And the best part is we do it early in the morning before the day gets hot, and also before all the mad traffic and the crowds descend on the place. So we'll be in and out before the city of Jaipur actually wakes up for work. So that is one good thing. So we'll finish that, and then we head towards Ranthambore National Park. And of course, tigers. So this is a very, very exciting trip for me because I love the park. Basically, I've been going there for the last 8 years now, as a NATAB expedition leader, but much longer before that as an enthusiast or a general Indian wildlife photographer. So I've realized that Ranthambore is one of the places where the opportunities for photography are endless. Ranthambore has gives one so much to think about, so many opportunities to play with. In fact, one of the things I tell when people come is that don't just look at tight shots and don't just look at tigers, just look at everything. The park is beautiful, and whenever you see things, think about how you want to compose it, think about how what kind of results you want. So, in fact, if you notice, all the tiger pictures I have shown till now are very different from each other, and that's how I want even everyone's profile to be. That's what I'll be trying to mentor all of you towards, and that is what I think is eventually nice to have a good portfolio of images after visiting a destination. So the really interesting thing about Ranthambore, like I told you, is that it was once the hunting grounds of the Maharajas of Jaipur. So the main feature of Ranthambore is the Ranthambore Fort, after which the park is named. So it's one of the largest forts in India, in fact, one of the largest forts in the world, and it spreads across various areas of the park. So there'll be a dense forest, and suddenly there'll be a fort wall, or there'll be like a huge old structure, which is like a meeting hall, which is now in ruin, and the ficus trees and the rocks have taken over. And all of this is actually part of the park, and the animals use it very much these days because in the absence of people, the animals and the forests have taken over the place. So the really interesting thing about Ranthambore, like I told you, is that it's a hot, dry place. But what stands out is that it is a place with a lot of basaltic rock. Basically, so it is very shallow soiled, lot of gorges, lot of hot freshwater springs coming out of these mountain gorges, and a lot of flowering that happens in the summer months. Because it's a monsoonal climate in India, the flowering happens in the summer, in the peak summer. So it kind of throws a dash of color into the Ranthambore landscape. So whenever I go to Ranthambore in summers, I'm always looking out for wildflowers because they add a beautiful element of color when you shoot the landscape of the park. So a lot of gorges, grasslands, cliffs, forest patches. So it's a very, very varied park, along with the fact that there are old fort ruins that still exist scattered across the park. And of course, these gorges, these forts, these forests are home to a very, very good number of tigers. In fact, tigers love to use these gorges because there's always water available in the bottom of the gorge. And what is very interesting is that they use the gorges as highways to get from one place to the other, especially in the summer, because the mountain tops are devoid of wildlife, because the mountain tops are basically very hot and dry, and all the waters in the bottom. So all the animals actually congregate inside these gorges, and that's where the tigers, leopards, the antelope, the deer, wild boar, all of them are in a very, very narrow space. That's what is special about summers in Ranthambore. And of course, like I told you, tigers do use the ruins. This is a picture we got a couple of years ago where the tiger was sitting along the archways that led to the palace of the kings. And this happens very often, but of course, whether it happens during the 1 week that we'll be there is a big question. But we will keep out for images like this. And like I told you, there is of course the whole thing of water. So because in the summers there's limited water and the temperatures are high, we are going to drive towards a lot of water bodies which are found in the bottom of the gorges, where hopefully we may come across tigers just cooling off. And what is interesting is, yes, we've spoken about tigers are shy animals, tigers are secretive animals, but also remember that all of these tigers have been seeing tourists and vehicles all their lives. So Ranthambore is one of the parks with the oldest tourism history in India. So the park has been open for tourism for the last 30 years officially, and longer, maybe before that. And so all the tigers in the park have grown up seeing vehicles, so they're very very used to vehicles. They're not bothered by the sound of vehicles. So when we come across a tiger, usually he or she is very comfortable with our presence. It's only a question of the setting, it's only a question of what the tiger wishes to do with its time on that day, that defines how well or how fast the viewing is. But otherwise the tigers are very very used to vehicles. And also, the lack of availability of water in the summer also brings them out into these open areas where we can see them well. So that is one of the special reasons why we go to Ranthambore in the hot summer months to look for tigers. But we've spoken about tigers, we've spoken about Ranthambore. I want to come back to the thing that we want to go to the park with an idea to photograph everything. In my last 8 years of guiding in Ranthambore, I think this is my most favorite photograph. This is the photograph I'm most happy about. This is the flame of the forest tree, which flowers in Ranthambore in the month of April. And on this tree, one day we came across a peacock that was sitting on top. And me and the guests spent about 20 minutes just watching this. There was a tiger around somewhere, but we knew that this frame we'll probably never get again in the morning sunlight. So I want you all to remember that when you're coming to the park, keep an open mind to see everything. Of course, we are going to be looking for tigers at all times, but there are going to be instances, there are going to be moments which probably make for fantastic photo opportunities that we want to make the most out of as well. And of course, talking about photo opportunities and other wildlife, the park is home to many species, including the sloth bear, which we have a very, very good chance of seeing. The park has a good population of sloth bears, but of course, they keep a low profile in the presence of tigers. But ever so often, we do try to see one of them if possible. So, sloth bear is one of the iconic bear species of India. So this is a baby riding piggyback on the mother, and that's what they do for the first 6 months of their life. So we'll be looking for sloth bears. We'll be looking for peacocks, of course, because peacocks are going to be in their beautiful best in the summer months. That's when they dance to attract the mate, and also very often the males fight. So we'll be looking out for things like that, more opportunities like that to get good images. Of course, the park is also home to a very good variety of bird life, including a lot of species of owls. So we'll be looking for owls. We know a couple of spots where we find nice fish owls and scops owls and owlets. So we'll be stopping at different places to look for owls as we go through the park. And of course, there are other cats, like leopards are also there in Ranthambore. So don't worry if you don't see one in Jalana. You have a very high chance of seeing leopards in Ranthambore as well. And of course, you have small cats like jungle cat, we have crocodiles, we have various species of deer. So the park has a lot to offer. Every drive is going to be exciting, every drive is going to be different. And of course, there is a huge array of bird life also in the park that is going to make for fantastic photographic opportunities. In fact, when I go to the park, I look at everything, like I've told you. So sometimes we even make images like this of at sundown. There was this beautiful sheet web uh, spider web, like a social spider. So there are about 1 million spiders probably in that web, with the babies included. And as the sun was setting, this was glowing like a diamond in the landscape. So we tried to make some images. So yes, so there is a lot to do in terms of photography. There's a lot of species: sloth bears, leopards, jungle cats, deer, antelope, wild boar, birds, crocodiles, everything. So we try to try to look at everything along with looking for the tiger in the park. Because remember, all of these animals being there is the reason a tiger is able to survive in that park. Remove one of the elements away from the park, and probably the whole dynamic of the park would entirely change. And of course, tigers again. I Because we want to talk about tigers, I also want to talk about black and white photography, which is something I absolutely love. Tigers are very good black and white subjects, like zebras are in Africa. A lot of you would have seen great pictures of zebras as black and white, but interestingly, not many pictures of tigers in black and white. They make very good black and white images, especially if someone's keen. I still remember 2 years ago we did a group where everyone was on board and we just shot black and white for 3 days. We in fact we forced ourselves by changing the filter in our camera to black and white so that we only think in those lines. So I'm not saying everyone should do this, but we can experiment with ideas like this once a month scheme. But having said all this, some of the great images from our trips have also been made by people with phones. So we will be looking at photography with their phone. So don't worry if you don't have a big lens or a big camera. Though it is a photo trip, we do have a lot to offer even for those with phone cameras who want to just shoot with their phone cameras. It's absolutely all right. This is a phone image of a peacock dancing on a forest path in Ranthambore, shot black and white again. So the perspectives that you get with a wide angle, when you know you're restricted to a wide angle, can be very very beautiful because you know you can't go further closer. So you make the most of what you have, and that's when like composition and light and your brain becomes more active or as to how to make better images with what you have. So yeah, so we have something for everyone when we come on this photo trip to Ranthambore. And of course, the last but not the least for sure is the Taj Mahal. I'm not much of a monument guy, if I may say that, but we have very very good guides in Agra, and I've been to the Taj Mahal about 15, 20 times now, and I can tell you with absolute surety that whatever images you've seen before of this monument, nothing is going to ever prepare you for the real thing. And of course with I'll also try to find some interesting perspectives and angles from where you can shoot the Taj apart from the standard straight up thing that most people get. We'll also go to different places of the city, different parts of the city, other monuments in the city where we can look at the Taj through a different lens. So look at the Taj. In fact, this particular image, I absolutely like because in this image, uh, the frame is almost what it would have been 400 years ago when the Taj was built. So there is almost no element of modernity in this frame except for this one or two lamp posts, which I'll teach you in Photoshop how to remove. But otherwise, this is one of the frames where you can say that everything in the frame is as it would have been about 400 years ago. So we look for things like this. We try to make it interesting. And of course, for a very small additional fee, I also do photography like this. I'm kidding. We have a lot of fun even while visiting the Taj. We try to experiment with different kinds of photography to get interesting results of you guys, of people, of me. I could be your model, all of that. So we have a lot of fun when we go to the Taj Mahal. So, talking about photography, of course, NATAB is going to give you a very comprehensive pre-departure book, the PDB, and of course, they're going to make sure that you get this that you can read up on. It's a very basic camera concept. So, if you are able to understand these concepts, then everything else is easy. So, of course, I'll be there in the field. I'll be me or any other expedition leader. I'm guiding two of the trips. There could be others guiding other trips. We will be teaching you all of these things in the field as well. But if you have a good mirrorless camera or an SLR camera, please understand these things before your trip if you can, because once you come, we can work further and make you play around more with these concepts. But along with this, I also want to say we will also be doing sessions on post production of images. We'll also be doing sessions on video making, on making reels, because that's a new thing for those of you on social media. We also talk about how to quickly edit images on the phones, certain apps and softwares that work fantastically for that. So we'll be looking at a whole bunch of things uh, outside of our safaris when we are in the park. And of course, I'll be talking a little bit more about tigers, giving a different perspective, a very Indian perspective of tigers, a local perspective of tigers, while so I'll be giving a couple of talks as well while over there. In fact, I want to just talk about one or two things before is that this is the frame I told you. This news, not necessarily good news, because you have to remember India is a country with 1.4 billion people, and a 33% rise in a big cat population is not necessarily good news. Tigers are prolific breeders. If you give them space and you give them some prey and habitat, tigers breed very well. And these young tigers, once they grow up, have to leave the park because parks like Ranthambore are full of people, sorry, full of tigers. So there's no space in the territory dynamics of the park for new tigers. So either they have to fight for their place or they have to leave the park. And when they leave the park, this is usually what happens. So there is a huge rise in conflict happening in different parts of the country now. We will talk about it during the trip, but I want you to be aware that conservation, a good conservation plan without a follow up plan may not necessarily be a good thing. So we are working, WWF and a lot of authorities, a lot of people in India are now working towards creating these safe passages or corridors for tigers that connect various tiger populations. So we will talk about that more on our trip. But as you move through our highways, as you move through our cities, as you move towards Ranthambore, even while staying in Ranthambore, keep this image in mind because you need to remember that you're going into a park where you're seeing tigers, but there are tigers almost 40, 50 miles around the park, outside protected areas, roaming in fields and farms, living off cattle. And this is the daily life of those tigers. This is how India is. India is a busy place. As much as I like to use Google Maps to show how green the country is, this is actually how India looks from space. It's a very populous country. Tigers and wildlife are restricted to small islands. There are railway tracks, highways, lots of people. So, this is what the tiger sees when it leaves the park. And there is a lot to do in terms of fixing this problem and making it a safe haven for both tigers and the people. Usually the poorer population, the poorer people who live at the edge of these parks suffer the most. So this is a very interesting thing. So talking about corridors, this is a record of a tiger which walked almost 800 miles from one park to another and made it. So not many stories end up this way, but this tigress actually made an 800-mile journey from one park to the other. And now that corridor, that this trail taken by this tigress is slowly being protected over time. So these are the concept of corridors, the way we can connect parks. So camera trapping efforts are showing which routes tigers are naturally taking, and slowly people are working towards protecting islands or small parts of this corridor so that tigers have good resting places and safe havens while going through these corridors. This is a task which is easier said than done overall because of the very population of India. It's not easy. If you talk about a corridor, there are probably about 2 million people over there. What do you do with those people? So it's not easy. It's not an easy concept, but this is the only way forward. So we did speak about these are all like concepts. I just wanted you all to understand a broader picture before coming to Ranthambore in India. Is that we spoke about how tigers were once everywhere, but now the forests are there, but the tigers aren't there. So one of the things the government is trying is to augment prey by wild boar and deer in places where tigers used to be there but are not there anymore, maybe because of hunting or maybe because of local extinction. So bring back the prey and then bring in tigers from parks like Ranthambore and repopulate forests. So that's a concept that's happening, especially because the tigers can't walk by themselves because of how many people there are between the parks. This is a concept that's happening at the moment. Along with corridors, manual translocation of prey and tigers is also being considered seriously, and it's actually being practiced in one or two areas in India. So, if you look at the map to the right, you can see the orange parts are where tigers are, and the blue is where tigers were found about, I would say, just about 40 years ago. So tiger numbers have gone up, but the tiger's overall range in India has come down. So this prey augmentation, this translocation of manual translocation of tigers could eventually bridge the gap. But it is a concept at the moment, but it requires a lot of political will and people's will for it to happen because people need someone who's lived their entire lives without tigers in their forest. Suddenly you can't go to them and say, now we are going to release six tigers in your backyard. You have to be okay with it. So it is a very complicated conservation idea, especially when it comes to big cats that can cause a lot of harm to people, and also a population of people that could harm the big cats, vice versa. So we have to remember all this. So as you leave Delhi, move towards Ranthambore, remember that just around Delhi there were tigers about 100 years ago. and that is where we have come from then to now. But I believe not all is bad. Of all the countries in South and Southeast Asia, India is the only place you have a realistic chance of seeing tigers. India is the only place which has a healthy population of tigers. India is the only place with a growing number of tigers. And India is the only place where you can boast that we're creating new reserves, new places for tigers. So, despite having 1.4 billion people, we're doing something right. We have gotten certain things right, but of course, there is a lot of work to be done for the future. I really look forward to seeing you all in India. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them over the next whatever time we have left.
All
Thank you.
right. Surya, thank you so much. Now, before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right corner of your screen where you see those three lines, click on that, and go to the question field. All right, we let's go to the questions. So, if I have a spotting scope and binoculars, is that something I should bring with me on the trip?
Well, a spotting scope, Rob, I wouldn't necessarily suggest because in a vehicle, using a spotting scope is definitely going to be difficult. But if they have binoculars, absolutely. Binoculars, I think, are the most essential tool, whether you're a photographer, whether you're going on safari, whether you're going on a nature hike, definitely binoculars. But for a trip like this, a spotting scope may be an overkill because there won't be space to keep it, and usually it's a forested environment, so things are closer by. So a spotting scope may not be necessary.
Do you have a recommendation on the type of lens I should use? Is an 800 millimeter lens too much, or should I have something different?
Well, an 800 millimeter lens is of course has gives you fantastic results. It is never too much, but I have to tell you that you will be restricted very often by how close the animal can be. So if you're carrying an 800, I would also suggest that you carry a 70-200 or even a 24-70 lens so that you have an option to make different kind of images. An 800 is a good thing to have, a good primary lens to shoot wildlife, but along with that, please keep 70-200 ideally, or a 300 prime if you like prime lenses, or even a 24-70. These are the things I would suggest along with a 800 or a 600, whatever it is that you have.
Great, thank you. How much walking are we going to be doing on this trip?
Well, the walking part is almost negligible. We will be on vehicles on safari. Like I said, we will be doing some city walking in Delhi and Jaipur for the street walks, street photography. In Ranthambore, fundamentally, there's no walking. We will only be on jeeps. But for those interested, we also walk up to the fort, the Ranthambore fort, between safaris on one of the days because it's a great aerial perspective of the park. So we actually go to the temple on top of the fort and look down at the park from there. So that involves a little bit of walking. But otherwise, the core of the trip doesn't necessarily have any walking.
So, how comfortable are the vehicles, and will I be able to have a window seat, or will somebody be in the middle?
So these are open vehicles. So these are open vehicles, open top vehicles. There are no windows. So on all sides, you're open to the surroundings. The vehicles are very comfortable. Actually, in fact, they're designed for photography. So every bar is has padding so that they can become a bean bag. We also have bean bags. The guests can sit next to the driver in the front also if they want to shoot a lower perspective. There are two rows of seats, and remember, it's a photo trip. There's only people per vehicle, so you essentially have an entire seat to yourself. So you'll be very comfortable, and there is no window seat concept or anything. You'll have 360 views of the park. Of course, I have to. Having said that, I want to mention that Ranthambore, like I said, is a very rocky park. So even though the vehicles are good, the rides can sometimes be a little bumpy. So if anyone has a back issue or something like a neck issue or something that I need to know about, please let me know so that I can position you in the vehicle in the right places. And of course, when you see something, you can move around, but essentially you can be in the least bumpy part of the car. And I can also inform the driver to be extra careful while going through the rough patches.
Good to know. Thank you so much. Um, so, Were there as many people relative to tigers in the past as there is now?
Can you repeat that, Rob? I didn't follow that. Sorry.
Yes. So in the past, were there as many people relative to the number of tigers now in the past as there are now? So are the populations about the same?
No, 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 no. So tigers, let's say, I'll just to give put it in perspective, in the 1900, around the turn of the 19th, 20th century, 1900, there's believed to be about 10,000 to 12,000 tigers in India, and the number of people in India was 250 million. Now we have 1.4 billion people and 4,000 tigers. So definitely not.
Great, thank you
It's
for that.
it's a very different world.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. Um, so, do you have any recommendations for us how we can protect our cameras and our lenses from dust or any other debris that we may encounter?
Absolutely. So we will provide blankets in the vehicles. We can provide cloth, but the best way to do it is if you have a camera bag. If you have a well-designed camera bag, you can keep your lenses inside and keep it zipped up, and whenever you see something, you can pull it out. But sometimes that you lose a few precious seconds when you do that. So what I generally say is just wrap your camera in an old T-shirt or an old shirt, or if you have like a shawl, just wrap it up in that and keep it next to you. And whenever you can see something, just open it up and shoot. Remember that you have an entire seat to yourself in the vehicle, so you can always leave the camera next to you. Just keep it wrapped up. The dust is can be bad at times, especially if we end up following another vehicle because there's something happening ahead and we can't avoid it. So in those situations, I would recommend, yes, just cover your camera up with any piece of cloth, and that's good enough. That's the very simple solution. But those of you who have good camera bags and don't mind taking the camera out, shooting and putting it back in every time, that is the best thing to do because there's also padding and everything. There's no risk of camera falling, any of that. But what I generally do is I just wrap my camera in a dust bag or wrap it up with my t-shirt or a cloth or a shawl and leave it next to me.
Great, thanks for that advice. So, since we're going to be tracking tigers, especially near water, are we going to have to worry about mosquitoes and other bugs like that? Should we bring bug
No,
repellent?
no, 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 definitely not. The only time when you might face some mosquito action is in the evenings because in the daytime mosquitoes are primarily nocturnal. So when they get active in the evening, which is when we'll be in our hotels, I would that this is something which I will tell all of you anyways when you come. I would suggest that make sure that you keep the doors of the hotel of your room closed when you're entering an existing the room. Don't leave the door open because that's when mosquitoes can come in. But otherwise, no. Otherwise, you won't face any mosquito issues while on safari.
Great, thank you. So,
Because we
sir,
will
yeah,
also, Rob, I just want to add to that, we will be doing all our drives in the day. There are no night drives, so in the daytime, mosquitoes aren't active. Yes.
great, thank you. So let me ask you this, Surya. Is there one sighting of a tiger or one special moment that you could share with us that you've experienced out there that you still can't believe you saw?
Well, well, one of the most incredible things I've seen, and I know that I could have seen it only because it happened in Ranthambore, is we were just driving down a track. This is I think our sixth drive of that trip. We had seen tigers, we had seen leopards, we've had a good time. Everyone's like just talking about I don't know baseball or something. We were having a good time. I was trying to understand what they're saying because I don't know baseball. But randomly, as we turned the corner, there was a small stream by the side of the road, and just at the edge of the stream, I saw a tigress lying down, and she was not lying down in the water, but she was just lying down like on her side by the side of the stream. And we stopped the vehicle, and all of us were watching, and then a couple of other vehicles came, and all of us they were all photographers. They were just clicking pictures, and that photographic scene didn't excite me that much, so I was just watching with my binoculars, and suddenly I saw that from her belly, three heads popped out. So, like from the other side of her belly, so she was lying with her back to us on her side. On the other side, three faces popped up, and they were three probably 3 week old cubs or 2 week old cubs, and they were suckling on the other side. and I couldn't believe my eyes, because this is usually that happens like deep inside the forest in a cave. Tigers would never expose their cubs like that, but only because of Ranthambore and the tigers are so used to vehicles. This female, especially, her name is Noor. She's a very famous tigress of the park, and she was suckling her cubs by the roadside with like four vehicles watching her, and the cubs were like climbing on top of her body and sleeping on her, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, the cubs were like this big, this big. I mean, they were smaller than her paw, I have to say, but that is a sight I'll never forget. And I know that I can confidently say that the only park where I have a genuine chance of seeing tigers do that in the open is Ranthambore. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that again. But I know that if there is something special, a hunt or a mating sequence or a tiger chasing a leopard or a sloth bear chasing a tiger, all these very, very rare things, you have very good chances of seeing them in Ranthambore.
Sounds amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for your closing comments.
Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for joining in today. I would like to say that we are all really looking forward to seeing you in India. But remember what I've told you today. Remember what I told you about being open to seeing everything. We have enough drives. We are going to have a good chance of seeing tigers. But having said all that, we also have to see Ranthambore, the park, India, what everything has to offer. Learn about the stories. Go back with learnings and not just images. So that's something I'd like to tell you all before you come to India. And really looking forward to having you here.
Surya, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you are interested in seeing tigers with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.